same thing.
Yeah, that's
They're doing a bunch of town halls.
That's good. It's 5 o'clock in time for the regular scheduled meeting of the Natchitoches Parish School Board Committee as a whole. Board members and visitors, please silence your cell phones and electronic devices as not to interrupt the meeting. Thanks for your cooperation in that. Board members, I know I ask every meeting, but let's try it one more time. Please speak directly into your microphone because the viewing public loves to hear what you have to say. And Ms. Revels, can you give us a second on that roll call? Okay. All right. Superintendent, would you like to go ahead and get your update going?
Sure. So for the month, really the month of February, but for the March board meeting, have some things to report to y'all, and we have a guest in the audience as well that I'll get to in a minute. So I want to start off with, I want to thank the board for supporting us going to NIT conference this year. The most consequential professional conference I've ever been to. And it's actually the second NIT conference I've been to, which y'all are well aware of that. But this was by far the best. Just first off, I want to highlight the fact that our district ILT team, headed by Mr. Legrand and his team, did a phenomenal job. I want to highlight the fact that they were the only team from the state of Louisiana who were put on that spotlight like that. I will congratulate our friends in DeSoto for getting the Founders Award, but in terms of instruction, they were the only team who were part of an instruction team that literally superintendents, board members, teachers, all levels of school personnel from around the nation. In fact, the lady sitting next to me was from Alaska. We're learning from. One person came up to me and they said, unnecessarily so, I didn't ask them for their opinion, but they said that the district ILT bubble session by Natchitoches Parish was the highlight of the entire conference for them. So that's a big deal. I mean, I don't know how much everyone knows about NIT, but it's one of the nonprofit education organizations in the nation, headed by Mr. Lowell Milken, who is one of the most philanthropic billionaires in the entire United States, based on the amount of money he gives and what he's done at NIT and what you've seen districts do because of their organization is nothing short of amazing. And to know that little old Natchitoches is being recognized by them. And so I got to go to, and I don't consider myself this, but I got to go to a special little VIP meeting with several superintendents and Mr. Milken. And the fact that at every level of NIT, they know about Natchitoches and they know who we are, and it's just really, really cool. And I can't tell you how much it rejuvenated me in this journey we're on. What I would also like to tell you is my friend Dr. Gray from Jefferson Parish, he brought 5 board members with him this year. And I'm just going to put this on y'all's radar. I would love to bring some of y'all to NIT next year, because I think a lot of what we do, y'all know about it, but I don't know if y'all really know how the sausage is made, and especially those of you who have been in classrooms and been educators, and even those of you who haven't been. I think it would enlighten you even further as to how strategic, how scientific, and how I hate to use the word, but cool the stuff they're doing is. So I will put that in the next year. I'll remind y'all. I don't know where it's going to be next year. I don't think they even know yet, but I just want to put that on y'all's radar. So thank you again for supporting that, because it's not just a conference, and I know some people go to conferences to do all sorts of things. I never go to an Orlando conference because that's just to go to Universal in Orlando. But this really, it fed the people we needed to be fed. So thank you again. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about the fact that all 4 of our basketball teams made it to playoffs this year. Both girls teams are out now, but they had fantastic seasons. That's both Lakeview and Central. And I want to highlight that Lakeview will be playing in the next, hour or so. And so we really are rooting for them from the boardroom. And then also Natchitoches Central will be playing Friday, I believe, and they're going to be playing Ruston. So I hope they both make it. I hope we're able to next month have 2 state champions come to the board meeting and be recognized.
Before you break into
Yes, sir.
some of the things, Ms. Revels, can we interrupt the superintendent's meeting, comments for a roll call?
Mr. Danzy,
Here.
Mr. Matoir,
Here.
Mr. Benefield,
Here.
Mr. Harris, Mrs. McGaskey. Here. Ms. Palmer,
Here.
Ms. Phelps, Ms. Harvey,
Here.
Mr. Fredo, Mr. Nicholson,
Here.
and Ms. Page.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Superintendent.
Yes, sir. And so, along with those hopeful state championship basketball teams, we're going to invite some of our friends from East Natchitoches because I think for the past 3 years, they have been rocking it at the regional and state science fair. And they recently did that again at the regional, and they're going on to state. So we'll be asking them to come share some of their success with us, and we can take some pictures and put them in the journal and all that fun stuff we do. I want to let everyone know that we are on schedule to be moving into that building being the technology building. We will be initiating that Monday, and we will be moving groups at a time. As you can tell, you can basically use the parking lot now. And on the 18th, everyone should be already moved over there, and then we will be able to start the remodel of this space over here. And hopefully that'll take not too much time, and we'll be back to normal, I'm hoping by September, but I'm not going to put a date out there. Also want to mention to y'all, the tax y'all voted on last month has been submitted to the bond commission, and we made sure to dot all our I's and cross all our T's, and so that should be stamped here pretty soon by that bond commission. I want to switch gears really quickly. There's been some concern lately in the public sphere, and from some board members have broached about some questions raised about how discipline is handled, how principals handle discipline, how responsive they are, or in some cases, I guess, aren't, to teachers. And I won't spend a ton of time on this, but if any board members have questions before we pivot to our presentation on performance-based pay, I'll honor those. But this is my 17th year in education, and every year I've been in education, this dynamic has been under scrutiny. And what I mean by that is when I was a teacher, I remember my principal one time, a kid had destroyed a brand new geography book, and I wrote the student up, and my principal came to me and said I had a lack of classroom cognizance, and said that was my fault, that I didn't see the kid writing all over the book. That dynamic of, and that's a severe one, I think, but that dynamic of there being different perspectives at different levels is always something we battle. A teacher who's involved with a disciplinary action, that is their entire world. And I don't mean that in a way that minimizes what's going on, but that world they live in that classroom, that is everything they're dealing with. As it gets to the next level, it's sometimes easy for an administrator to, at times, maybe minimize what they're seeing secondhand on a referral. Now, I think the best administrators try not to do that. They try to put themselves in the teacher's position. But again, it's that different perspective. You know, principals are trying to maybe keep kids in school and keep that discipline rate low and keep a suspension rate low, and a teacher's just trying to get through their lesson. And so I think you're always going to have that push and pull to some degree. But what we always try to do is we always try to give principals tools and teachers tools to, number one, prevent things from happening, but we know they're going to happen. But number two, to respond consistently. I think even when a teacher disagrees with the action of a principal, if that principal has been consistent every time with how they deal with it, and it's not, well, I dealt with it this time with Teacher McGaskey, and this time I dealt with it differently with Teacher Page, that's when those issues arise. And so it's teacher voice also being not heard at times, or at least not feeling heard. And so one of the things that we've been working on, that I've been talking to principals about, and I've mentioned this to y'all before, and it's something that I would really like to develop because it works for me as well. As y'all know, I have a teacher advisory committee that comes to me at the district level, and we meet quarterly, and it's not like our ILTs and things like that where we're talking academics. It's the other stuff that sometimes we don't think matters, but it does. Like For instance, what kind of cake do we get for the retirement parties, and how big is that cake? Or parking spots. Do we have a teacher of the year? Those things that the day-to-day things that we sometimes forget about. And I'll be honest, sometimes we act like they don't matter. What I would like to see is, I think the more we elevate teacher voice on some of those items in a space, whether it be through a teacher advisory council or a faculty senate, the more those misunderstandings due to different levels and different perceptions, the more they come to understand a little bit of where each other are. And a principal can see the frustration, and a teacher can see perhaps the frustration of their principal, and they can understand each other better, and they feel heard, and they feel valued. And so some of these things that crop up don't necessarily carry as much weight as if you have some of these structures in place. So you have it in some schools, but it's something I'm going to be working with principals on to develop a little further, because I think the more teacher voice we have in that, and it doesn't mean that principal's going to run off and do everything a teacher advises, but it's going to give them a diverse perspective of what's going on in their school that they might not fully always recognize and understand. And so I know the board, y'all probably know what I'm referencing here, and many of y'all asked me to kind of reference this generically, but this was brought up in a public sphere about principals not advocating for teachers. Specifically, I think there were some things said about when it's the most severe behaviors. So I do want to briefly touch on that. When a student has a behavior, we have to also recognize that students have rights and they have due process, just as teachers do. And so it's always walking that line of managing both those things, and it's a very difficult job, but it's a doable job. And I do want to tell teachers and all staff members that first priority is student safety, but right there with it is teacher safety. And so, when a teacher is if possibly is being harmed, that's something we're going to take very seriously. Or staff. And I think sometimes when people don't see, they're not privy to all the conversations behind the scenes. They're not privy to the IEP meetings and the calls to lawyers and so they assume that nothing's going on. But I can tell you, we have deep discussions about strategic things and how to handle these things both legally and also in a way that supports teachers and supports students. It's just, they're complicated matters. And I know that's dancing around a lot of things, but if y'all have any specific questions about any of that, I'll stop talking, and because I know I do a lot of that, and open it up to anything y'all have.
You can go ahead, Ms. Hart.
Okay, we had a previous discussion, but my concern was in reference to issues where you have student as a repeat offender, and we're dealing with a situation where there's in-school suspension that is used for disciplinary reasons.
Stop.
But what we're running into is teachers having complaints about having to deal with disciplinary issues from a student. They're sent to the office on a repeated basis, and I don't know what they do, something like a timeout. I'm not sure. You have to explain so the public knows. I'm not sure what they do. I know it's different in different schools, and there was a program you mentioned about that it was just a little bit too, we couldn't have like a full-time teacher to handle that particular disciplinary whereby the child or the student would be placed into a different classroom, and they would take the same classes they would have if they were in a general setting, and they would eventually be processed back into the classroom based on how they were progressing. And I wish that we could do something like this rather than, but if it's not practical, if you don't have a teacher to handle that particular situation at the school, because I do understand that we need them in the classrooms. But if you're running into the situation where you have students that are having repetitive bad behavior, and they are sent to the office and whatever action is taken, which I think maybe the public needs to be made aware of it, if they're sent back into the classroom, that behavior is repeated, and it shows that there's some sign of disrespect for the teacher having to handle this situation, and it's not being resolved, you know, in a manner that it should be. This is something that I have been asked by teachers at different schools. And so if you can please give us some insight.
Yeah, so I think there's first off, what I would say is we never want to get in this ivory tower of blaming teachers for behavior, but we also want to be in an area where we want to discuss that teachers do have a responsibility in being the first one to address behavior. Again, don't want to be in that ivory tower, but we also have to recognize the fact that when we say free and appropriate public education, that doesn't say for the good kids. And so when we say that, very much the law looks at it as, yes, this student is doing these things, but it's our job as professional educators or a district or principals or superintendent to support teachers enough to put things in place to be able to mitigate, prevent, or deter those behaviors. And I think that's what we're talking about some of our policy. And I think we can do some of that in our policy. I think some of it is also training for teachers. We have students now, I worked at a developmental center. We never suspended kids, and we had to be really inventive on what we did because we weren't allowed to by federal law. And we got really good at students with horrible behaviors on dealing with that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there are methods for 99% of behaviors. And I think that you have that 1% outlier of students who are going to do the most awful things, the worst things, and they're going to do them repetitively. But I've seen even in my own career, it's like, oh, that kid is horrible in my classroom, and then they go over to Miss Barbie Page's classroom, and she does her teacher magic, and all of a sudden they're amazing. So some of it is, how do we train teachers better to be able to respond to that? Because we all can think of a teacher that no one got away with anything in their classroom. But I think what we have in a lot of our schools is we have teachers who are new to the profession. They're trying to just understand content and get through the day. And so sometimes they're not the best classroom managers. So how can we support them even more to be able to do all that? And some of it's going to come with time. In terms of what a principal needs to do or can do, there's a million tools at their disposal in terms of, you can do time out of room. And it's an official thing, but it's also kind of unofficial. I would have the kid him and that teacher just did not get along. And it's like, come sit with me. I'm going to, as an assistant principal, I'm going to teach you math during this hour, or you're going to file papers for me this hour. And eventually we're going to get back to the classroom. That's one thing. You can call parents. That's effective for some kids. For some kids, it's not effective. You can, do ISS. You can do lunch detention. You can do Saturday detention. You can do out-of-school suspension. You can do expulsion. But the point of all those things, those are typically punishments. And what I've learned, even with my own kids, and I'm not saying, they're not hellions or anything, but with my own kids, there are certain things that work with the oldest that don't work with the youngest, and so I have to find that niche. And I think it also comes with the relationship between the student and the teacher, and understanding them and understanding how they tick. And so you got to have all those things in place. But again, think of the unique difficulty of a teacher's job. They're trying to teach all these things. They have all the stuff, requirements from the state. They have all the requirements from us. And at the end of the day, they just want students to behave. And so we as a district have to support them in that, and we have to give them more tools, and we have to provide more professional development. And when students are above, or they're just to a level that it's, everyone's in agreement, then we use those nuclear options. But, it's that tightrope I'm on of honoring teachers, respecting teachers, but then at the same time trying to productively move a student through school. And all the stuff shows us, whether it's the school to prison pipeline or whatever you want to call it, they look at how many kids fail the reading portion of third grade to dictate what prison population sizes are going to be 10 years later. So there is that balancing act. And I'll be honest, sometimes we do a really good job and other times we don't. I think I always, and I'm not saying pat me on the back like I did this well, but I always had a way of when there was that situation that was hard to navigate, sitting down with a teacher and saying, what do you want done? What do you suggest? Okay, we can't do that. We can't do flogging in a public square. What next? And then trying to get together on it, because that collaboration, it just is helpful. But yeah, it is a difficult thing to, and I don't know if I'm necessarily even giving you a good answer. I just know it's an extremely complicated thing. Discipline on a school campus, and Mr. Nicholson's about to talk, he can probably attest to that. But our best principals do it really well. But also think about the schools where you have the most behavior problems are also the schools where we have our most inexperienced teachers. And at the same time, these are often the students with the most needs. And so then it becomes a staffing thing where, and Ms. Page and I will tell you, we try to put our most experienced teachers at those schools, but that's a whole nother discussion for another day. So there's a lot of variables in there, but it's something we are constantly talking about, whether it be in policy or staffing. We've been talking about staffing all week, and like, how can we get the best teachers at these places with the kids with most needs? So I'm sorry, I'm talking again. Mr. Nicholson?
No, you're good. I'm not going to talk much on it, but I'm just going to agree and say it's probably one of the most difficult things that a principal can do in many instances, and it is a fine line on what should or should not occur in that classroom. But I think at the end of the day, the main thing is trust between your disciplinarians, your administrators, and your teachers, because the teachers have to feel supported. And if you lose that trust from the teachers, well, then things tend to spiral, quickly. And I think most principals do a very good job of it, but you're right, they're not always going to make the quote-unquote right decision. But I think the key thing is just making sure that the principals and the teachers are on the same page. And if there's a question about what's going to happen, maybe the disciplinarian goes and speaks with the teacher, like you said, and that works 1,000% of the time, right?
Because
You
the
can't
teacher
always
feels-
do.
They feel like they're being involved in something that's,
Absolutely.
and that's just, I mean, that's kind of like basic psychology.
That
It's
is
like-
absolutely right. But I think a lot of times maybe that doesn't happen, especially in a situation where there's a larger school population and much more instances occurring every day. And so they feel like sometimes that portion of it gets passed over, but
Well, I can tell y'all,
probably need to do a better job at it, right? And I think what you were saying about the teacher committees, with that goes a long way.
well, and I can tell y'all, this is something that in our end of year and also some of our summer principal meetings, we're going to be talking through with principals and say, okay, like, but I got to tell y'all, I mean, on the other hand, there's a frustration level with principals, and so we have to be, we're trying to walk multiple tightroads at the district, because trust me, everyone thinks we don't know what we're talking about. So we're trying to do that, because at the same time we're talking to principals are like, yeah, but I got 100 referrals yesterday, and you want me to talk to, so there's a nuance to this, but I do think we can get to a better place. And I think half of that is just having the conversations, and, just like we're doing now. And if we have those with principals, they're even keeled enough, especially after that last day of school, where we can sit down and kind of take all the weight off our shoulders and talk about how can we, not that you're doing bad, but how can we improve? How can we do even better? So if there's no other questions, I enjoyed that conversation. Y'all know I love to hear my own voice. But I would like to pivot. We have a guest, flew all the way from California to spend time with us in little old Natchitoches. But it's Dr. Tanae Hudgens, and I'm going to read her bio real quick. She is the Vice President of Research and Evaluation for NIT. As Vice President of Research and Evaluation at NIT, Dr. Tanae Hudgens is responsible for establishing, managing, and overseeing research and evaluation initiatives with the organization. Dr. Hudgens directs NIT's research agendas, leads the production of evidentiary support for all initiatives, plays a key role in managing grant partnerships, and supports all aspects of the NIT research activities. Dr. Hudgens also served as a senior associate for NIT. Prior to joining NIT, she evaluated the quality of instruction and care provided to preschoolers, as well as the recruitment, retention, and development of the early childhood care and education workforce across Los Angeles, California. Dr. Hudgens earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology from Spelman College and a Master's of Arts and PhD in Developmental Psychology with a concentration in Quantitative Psychology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So she sounds very smart. But without any further ado, Dr. Tanae Hudgens, and she is going to elaborate on performance-based compensation for the board.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. First, I would like to say congratulations to your district for being one of 29 groups that was awarded this TSL grant in October. That was a very strong competition that went through a very rigorous recruitment and review process by a panel of reviewers. And so the fact that your district had such a competitive application and was successfully awarded this application already speaks to the commitment of the district towards this work. I'm going to speak specifically about one aspect of this work in this particular grant, which is the performance-based compensation piece, which is a requirement of all 29 grantees for this particular grant competition. I want to talk about 3 specific objectives on the next slide. One, so that we're all sort of just starting at a common understanding of, for this Teacher and School Leader Incentive Fund program grant, what exactly does the U.S. Department of Ed mean when they say performance-based compensation? And what are they requiring of all of the grantees who are implementing under this particular grant? Then we're going to switch to the why, right? So the U.S. Department of Ed has mandated this as part of their grant competition. So what's the evidence behind and the reasons why this particular element and system works? And then we're going to talk about, now that we have the grant and we know what works, what is your district going to do? On the next slide, it's specifically, we're going to, so this is sort of the what. This is how are we defining it based on the U.S. Department of Ed. So this particular slide is the actual definition of this particular grant. And so you were awarded a Teacher and School Leader Incentive Program grant, which is a grant that supports districts in 3 ways. They need to implement, improve, or expand that human capital management system. And the U.S. Department of Ed specifically says that the human capital management system, your entire overarching system, has to include a performance-based compensation. So going back to what I was saying earlier, that all grantees must have this, because the U.S. Department of Ed is prioritizing this particular program to raise student academic achievement and close achievement gaps in some of the highest need schools across the country. On this slide and the next slide are the exact words taken from the U.S. Department of Ed guidance documents. So this is the guidance that all of the grantees must adhere to when they're talking about what performance-based compensation systems must include. And so it's sort of a 2-part one. On the first slide, it was talking about specifically that we have to all include measurable increases in student academic achievement. And so for performance-based compensation to be distributed to teachers and school leaders, academic growth must be included, and then it can also include some of these additional elements that are on this slide. And so they're talking about making sure we are awarding differentiated levels of compensation based on different aspects that educators can bring to the field. So taking on additional roles and responsibilities. So this is where you think about those teachers who are doing serving in teacher leader roles and giving them additional stipends for that particular work that they're doing to support the learning in the schools. The U.S. Department has been implementing the precursor to TSL since 2006, when Congress authorized what was used to be called the Teacher Incentive Fund. That has gone through several iterations since 2006, and it was reauthorized in 2015, specifically to expand to include school leaders in a lot more aspects of the program. And what the Department of Ed has done to collect information over the year as they refined this grant opportunity is looking at the performance-based compensation system aspect and what is working well, and where do we see instances where performance-based compensation implementation does not work as well. And I'll talk about what well designed and well implementation mean in a second. But what we do know, based on a decade plus of work, is that when it is well designed and well implemented, we do see positive impacts on a variety of aspects of teachers, the school, and students. And so teacher attitudes is one area where we see more positive attitude. So speaking to some of the things you all were earlier about teacher voice, teacher collaboration, teacher participation in additional activities to build that collaborative and collegial environment, which impacts school culture, which then therefore impacts how teachers are performing with that additional support and their decisions to remain in the school and within the district. And then that therefore we see has impacts on student academic outcomes. Those programs and systems where we talking about them being well designed and well implemented have a couple of key characteristics that the research has identified over the past decade or so. One is that they have to be straightforward. So when we design a performance-based compensation system and we're saying that we're going to award stipends to teachers and leaders, people want to understand what that means. Who is eligible? Why are they eligible or ineligible? How is that calculated? When will that money be awarded, right? People want those details, so they need to be clear, concise, straightforward, understandable to people. That's one aspect of some of the key characteristics that we've seen in performance-based compensation systems. The second bullet is what the U.S. Department specifically defines and requires, right? So we have to be including student improvement. How are students progressing over time? Not just specifically focus on them meeting a specific level of attainment. The Department of Ed, in that two-parter definition, also talked about having multiple measures of effectiveness. So they said it needs to be based in part on student improvement, but can also be based on these other things that we know educators do to contribute to student performance, to their own success in the classroom. Additionally, we're talking about key items such as making sure that it continues to foster collaboration so teachers aren't competing against each other for this performance-based compensation. It has to work in conjunction with the rest of the improvement strategy for the district. And then money matters, so we have to make sure that the actual stipend amounts are substantial enough that people feel that they're worth the additional work or time and effort that they'll be doing. On this particular slide, I included a quote from a neighboring Louisiana district who is implementing this exact system. They had a grant previously awarded to them a few years ago. And this is just one teacher who's talking about how having this performance-based compensation system has improved their sense of community. So really thinking about how they're now working together, they're collaborating and sharing different strategies with one another, and that the students are seeing that collaboration and that support, so that the students are seeing that the teachers are coming together to work for the greater good of them and supporting them.
Ms. Hudgens,
Yes.
that slide there,
Yes.
you had mentioned earlier about retention.
Yes.
Do you see that leading to better retention of better teachers and those that don't want to put in the work leaving?
Yes.
Is that really a 1-2 punch?
It is, and you are right on target with what the next two slides we're going to show, because I pulled out a couple, I'm a researcher, so I love charts and graphs, so bear with me for a second. But I wanted to pull out a couple of examples that I thought would really resonate with you. Again, the Department of Ed has 10 plus years of research. This particular graph is of other districts in Louisiana who has done this exact work. Right, and so this is a combination of about 46 different schools within your state, and they implemented a performance-based compensation system for these 5 school years. And so what we talked about in the earlier slide, I was talking about some of the impacts. We see that with the implementation of this system, the percentage of teachers who are rated effective using the observation rubric and the observation system continues to increase over time. And so we're building in those supports for those teachers to improve their skill set. And then on the next slide is we're keeping those effective teachers, right? And so we are improving their ability to provide that instruction to students, and they're wanting to stay in those environments because they have that sense of community. They have those other educators that they can collaborate with. And they're getting support from the other teacher leaders. They're getting support from the school leaders and the district level leaders, and they're staying. And so this is specific evidence from the state of Louisiana. This grant the specific grant just ended, and we're in the process of finalizing some of the more recent data. But I wanted to share this with you as an example about teachers are improving in their craft, and then we're retaining those effective individuals. This other example that I pulled is a newer study that just was released over the summer by 3 economists. And they published this paper specifically talking about the long-run effects of a comprehensive teacher performance pay program on student outcomes. This is the first study of its kind to focus on long-run outcomes because, as I mentioned before TSL, there was TIF, which was the Teacher Incentive Fund, the precursor to this particular grant competition. And now that those students who were implementing the performance-based compensation, they're now in adulthood. And so we've had enough time now pass to think about where did those individuals end up as adults. And so this is an independent study that 3 economists wrote about the work that happened in the state of South Carolina. And what they found is that the individuals who were in these TAP schools who were implementing this performance-based compensation system as 8th graders were more likely to enroll in the 12th grade, more likely to graduate on time, they were less likely to be arrested before they turned 18, and they were less likely to rely on social welfare programs. The economists take these findings to the next level by talking about cost-benefit analysis, right? Talking about how the estimated benefits outweigh the cost of implementation of the system on 14-to-1 return on the dollar. So yes, there's money invested in sustaining the system and the implementation of a performance-based compensation. But when we think about the long-term outcomes that are in the money spent on students, we see a cost-benefit analysis here that shows that this works.
I think that's especially apropos to Natchitoches and what we are currently experiencing as a community. So, it's big.
The poverty level and everything else.
Yeah,
Exactly
powerful.
right.
And so this is the what's next, right, for your district sort of section of the presentation. What you all have been talking about and what we've been working together to do since October is what is the plan? The plan is for your district to do what you saw those other Louisiana districts do and what you saw the South Carolina, that 77 districts implement. That exact performance-based compensation system is what you'll see on the next slides. That they implemented is what your district's going to do. It contains 2 pieces. One is what does the model look like for teachers? And then on the next slide is what is the model for school leaders? Sorry. On the teacher one, sorry. On the teacher one, there are really 2 pieces here that these prior districts that we've worked with at NIET have done, and to date, that's a few hundred districts who have used this model in different states across the country. There are 2 models. One is focused on teachers who have classroom level data available, and then the other model is for teachers who do not have classroom level data. The dark blue section in both of these graphs is the observation evaluation component of the model. So all teachers are evaluated and observed, and that turns into a score at the end of the school year. And that is half of the pool of the money that they can earn for that school year. The grayish color is the school-wide academic growth, because remember, the U.S. Department of Ed is requiring growth as a model, as a key component of the system. And so this is that key piece that promotes collaboration and collegiality. Our entire school has to do well, and then we will all be rewarded for that growth that our students made. And then the one different element between the 2 models here is the orange piece, and again, that's for individuals who teach in a tested grade level or in a tested subject. So they will be able to earn performance-based compensation based on the growth of students in their classrooms.
Is that model pretty standard for all TAP schools? So I'm assuming like our K2 teachers, PE, art, those would be the ones that theirs would solely be based on, well, they're half their observation, but half on just school growth, right?
Correct. And that's standard. We've used that model in a few hundred schools across the country to date. And that's the exact same model that the South Carolina districts used, as well as those Louisiana districts on those prior slides. This particular slide is now switching from teachers to school leaders. Because again, what the TSL, Teacher and School Leader Incentive Fund Grant program, allows us to do is provide school leaders with performance-based compensation as well, thinking about their role in the learning of teachers as well as the learning of students. And so principals can earn that blue portion is that school-wide piece. How did the school grow over the course of the year? The orange piece is that school leader effectiveness rating. So at the district level, those observations and evaluations of the school leader's performance. And then that gray piece is the school leadership team piece. So this is that shared piece again, right? So the principal has a leadership team that they work day in and day out with, and they are observed and scored about that performance and how that ILT, the instructional leadership team, operates and sort of functions in day to day. That was a quick overview, but I just wanted to say again, thank you for the opportunity to provide some of this additional information and have this conversation with you today.
So, number one, thank you, Dr. Hudgens. Number two, I was sitting here like, and y'all know I'm a big softy, but like I'm almost like coming to tears because this has been a long journey in what this means for our teachers. And so, Ms. McGaskey, you asked me earlier about some of the, like, what do we do for teachers? I get excited about some of this because not only are we putting more money in their hands possibly, but it also, if I have a teacher who's really good at classroom management and she sees the teacher struggling, research shows that supports that collegiality where I'm going to help them because if only for the fact that I'm going to help the school in general. And so I do think we also have to look at this as like 2 years ago, y'all did a teacher pay raise for the first time in 14 years. And this is effectively a second teacher pay raise, but we always talk about fairness and whatever that word means, but this is a way, I always hear people say, well, they've been here for 20 years and they make more money than me, but they don't do anything. But this is about outcomes. And so it's so exciting to know that, yeah, we're doing our pay raise, but we're doing a pay raise in the most equitable, again, fair way possible that is about benefiting kids. But in terms of benefiting kids, it ultimately benefits the teachers as well. So I hope y'all realize how huge this is. I mean, I know we've been talking about it for a while, but Ms. Page is over there excited because in terms of recruitment, it's gonna change the game for us. And then your best slide, not that I was judging, but your best slide is that one that shows they get more effective and they stay.
Well, another one is the check-ins, the well implemented. Now, you can have a design, you can have a good design, poor design, but if it's not implemented, that's the part, the check-in process that y'all have. I like that. That's great.
And we're going to be going to every school, enrolling a similar version, probably the exact version of this out to the staff of every school, because I do think that big piece you touched on was that transparency. Because y'all know every time we give a stipend or anything, when, how, why, all those things, and we want to answer that before it's even asked. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Hudgens.
you.
So, Dr. Hudgens, you going to St. Louis from here?
I am.
You're just a world traveler.
Well, when you the two of them offered this opportunity to me, I said I couldn't say no. So I was able to join them at the conference in Dallas, pop home, and then pop back down here. So I'm excited for the opportunity to visit your town.
Thank you for taking the time to explain that to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
And that concludes my superintendent report for the month of March.
good deal. Board members, we don't have we don't have a new business section in our agenda, so I'm gonna take this time to talk about a couple items. Teacher and staff appreciation is quickly approaching. It's gonna be May 6th through 10th this year. We show our appreciation to our teachers and staff every year and have done a really good job with it. I'm going to ask one of our newest board members and newly retired teacher, Ms. Page, to chair this committee. I think she's fully up to the task. She's recently been appreciated, so she should know how that works. So, Ms. Page, you up to the task to help Ms. Rebels?
I guess I will.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Page. All right, good deal. Another item is the student workforce development. And we heard from a lot of different groups that we were doing those town hall meetings that students are not prepared for life or have life skills. When we were asking the community what we can do to better support them through the school system, they said, teach some life skills. Get these kids ready to go to work, and some of the comments, we don't teach the things like you used to teach in the past. All you teach is stuff for a test. Years ago, there was a class called General Business. Some of you that are in your whatever age, I'm not going to even talk about that, but you remember that. You learn how to create a budget, calculate simple interest, how to buy a car, how to balance a checkbook, how to do things like that. And 18-year-olds today are not like 18-year-olds that were 30 years ago. I mean, they will wear you out on a video game, but other than that, it's not there. I have 20-something-year-olds that work for me who have never written a check. Some of them don't even go to the bank. They just take a picture of it. And so, another thing is they don't know how to make change in the cash register. Simple things. If that cash register, you can't put $10 on it to where it spits out $7.11, they don't know what to do. I guess coins don't have the denominations on it anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. So I asked Ms. Phelps, our Louisiana School Board Association District 5 representative, to check in with Dr. Pope at the LSBA, determine if there's another district that has a program in place like this. And I mentioned it to Dr. Eloy. And he said Dr. Brumley, our state superintendent, has something in the works on the very same thing. We're going to have our town hall meetings in April. We're going to have 3 meetings this year, not 8. I think we gained a lot of good information last year, and I think the outreach to the community was wonderful. If you notice one of the slides that Dr. Hudgens said, and you go down to where it says, less likely to be arrested before 18 and less likely to rely on social welfare programs. If they're ready to go to work and are hireable, I mean, as part of we're not Niagara Parish School Board is not a staffing agency, but we can prepare our students to be a little bit better to go to work. I mean, you see kids that come in and apply for a job and have you done this, have you done that, and have no real work skills when it comes to stuff like this. So, board members, I'm asking your thoughts on this. Is this something that we should challenge? I think it is.
Totally agree.
So I have a question. When I taught financial math, I absolutely taught credit cards, checking accounts, and all of that. I thought they just passed it where it's now a mandatory class that everybody has to take it.
It is. That's what I was referencing, the legislation from this past year. I can't remember the legislator who, for some reason, I want to say it was Lance Harris. But there is a mandatory curriculum now for teaching all those kind of things.
That's good.
But there's some who I think are doing it in a better way. Probably we're even ahead of the game a little bit, is I think what Mr. Benefield is probably referencing.
So if we can incorporate that into that class you were talking about and have that count toward credit for graduation, I mean, I think this
It
is.
should. I mean,
I think this is something we're doing. There's help wanted signs all over town, and they can't fill the jobs. And
we used to get dual enrollment for financial math at the technical school when we did it as well.
Yeah.
Are they not doing that anymore?
So all my dual enrollment questions, I always defer to Ms. Pinkney. And a lot of those ones that were at the technical college aren't in the same place they were when the changeover happened. But I can get back with her.
But
And
I mean, like, the students that took my class received credit for that when they went to the technical college.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the issue back then probably was not everyone was taking financial math.
Correct.
Whereas now with the legislation that came through, it's going to be, you're going to have those pieces of that curriculum taught at some point in high school, whether it's through a financial math class or sometime they have to get that in order to graduate.
And if someone is better at it already and has a program that we can ride on their coattails, let's use it. Let's don't reinvent something that's working successfully somewhere in the state. And that was my only deal. And so Ms. Phelps is going to meet with Dr. Pope and find out. You know, she has her ear to the ground. She knows a lot of what goes on in these districts. So
and she would know the business end of it.
so I just think it's going to help our students. It's going to help our community. It's going to be exactly what we set out to do, support the community. So I think this is a worthwhile deal. Does anyone have any discussion on that or any questions?
I know that when we went to some of the classes last time, they had schools that actually were doing jobs. The students were doing it all, and I was really impressed with that.
Yeah. So are you talking about the,
Walker High and that.
Yeah.
there's some internships and then, what they were doing at Walker, they actually have businesses in the school.
They had business in the school, that's right.
So,
'Cause we might not have that opportunity because we might not have enough
remember, that's
kids to
what
do that.
Lee wanted to get the bank.
Yeah, that's right.
He still does.
Great if we had some of those.
But it's like banking. I mean, if you're there, you're gonna learn it.
You have no choice. And you know, you can calculate your payments. Here's my budget. Here's what I can spend. Here's what I can, you know, you don't end up upside down and sticker shock and all the things. But I mean, everything is so much more expensive today. And, I mean, just go to the grocery store and you roll out of that buggy and that buggy's half full and you spent a lot of money. Okay,
You
well,
know, the kids are being handicapped to a certain extent because they're using the calculators and they're using the laptops. And so you're talking about basic stuff, learning to count money, and which they should know that. And writing checks, people don't write checks anymore.
well, moving forward when we, yeah, and Ms. McGaskey, you're right, the cards.
Wrote about 100 of them.
Anyway, if we can get some information on that and we can incorporate that into an existing situation that we have at our high schools, it'd be great. Informational reports. Ms. Rashow.
Everyone's presenting with the exception of Mr. Shirley will be on Thursdays.
Good evening, everyone. Get to follow behind Dr. Is it Hutchinson? And she said money matters, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some money. I am going to be uploading a revised board meeting report for federal programs, because I left some important things off for our summer school cafeteria staff. I want to start by just kind of going over a couple of things that I have here, but putting some numbers to them. We did get the bathroom remodel project officially approved and funded for $130,000. Our ESSER 3 funding will expire September 30th, 2024. And I can tell you that I'm not as anxious as I was for ESSER 2, considering that I came into this position and there was still a lot of money left on the table. But that final year, that's when all of the initiatives that we had on the line items started to roll in and invoices come in and getting those things paid. So our projected allowable and approved expenses for ESSER 3 that is expiring September 30th, we have the completion of the Technology Center, which you can see it's coming up nicely. They're going to be my neighbors soon. We set aside 5.1 million, but we're gonna come under budget there. We have the HVAC project that is scheduled to roll out and to be completed prior to that September 30th. And what that means is that we will receive invoices and pay those invoices so that we can get the money from the State Department prior to September 30th, 2024. We have, of course, the bathroom remodel, our summer school staff benefits and supplies. I did not want to put a number there yet because the summer school committee is still working on solidifying the number of staff members, coordinators, students that we're going to serve. And so I'm going to hold off on that. But we do supply the students and the teachers with what they need to learn, and the teachers what they need to teach with during the summer. So the students just need to show up and be ready to learn. Instructional supplies to address learning gaps. I'm going to work with the teaching and learning department in March to start putting in requisitions so we can get purchase orders out immediately. And our goal is to have those things taken care of before the end of July. So. Technology purchases, we just recently did a purchase order for $799,000, a little over $799,000 for smart board upgrades for the following schools: 23 at East, 10 at Godana, 13 at NPTCC, 12 at Weaver, 2 at Provençal. Provençal actually went in last summer using their Title I funds to upgrade boards. 18 at Fairview, 12 at NSUE, 11 at NSUM, 17 at Magnet, 28 at Marthaville, 22 at LP Vaughan, 37 at Agnes Central, 20 at Agnes Junior High, 32 at Lakeview, 2 at NVA, and 5 at the Technology Center. And Mike and his team will be very busy this summer. The Math Accelerate Initiative is also coming out of ESSER 3. Just this month, we spent almost $700,000 on Zern for the 24-25 school year for math student workbooks for all K through 5 and those 6th through 8th grade students who are using it as a supplement. We have our refrigerator project that was approved. We earmarked little over $500,000, but we're waiting on a bid. The item above, this item, we're waiting on the accepted bid. It's my understanding that we got them in. Okay, so we may have to do some amendments there. The items above have been fully budgeted that I just talked to you about and approved. We are on track with our expenditures, and provided there are no unforeseen issues, we plan to utilize all the allocated funds. Any questions? We enjoy spending money on our students. Summer School 2024 is going to be funded using ESSER 3 and ESSER 3EB. ESSER 3EB we cannot touch. It is reserved for learning loss, and so that money is very, very restrictive. Last May or April, I can't remember when it was, we talked about the teacher pay per hour for summer school, so we can have high-quality educators closing those gaps. It's going to remain $50 per hour. It is important to know that this is just for summer school 24-25. Rates for janitors, teachers, cafeteria staff starting June 1, 2024 to June 27, 2024 at approved NPSB summer sites. Teachers at $50 per hour, janitors at $25. One-time stipend for summer school coordinators. All of these are the same rates as last year, $5,400. And nurses at $50 per hour. I need to make a revision on the stipends for principals because we did not have a discussion on that. Cafeteria managers are $28, not $14. And so I have already revised that. And yes, I have already revised that, and I will upload that, and the cafeteria technicians are at 14, correct? Okay. You want to do some cooking, Miss Palmer?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any questions about the summer school? Just a refresher on those rates. Okay. I was very much hoping to share with you our Title I school-based budgets, but I'm still looking at the requisitions that were submitted on March 1st, which is our deadline for our, you remember that, Mr. Nicholson, to our principals to turn in their final requisitions for their Title I funds, and I'm just still working on making sure that the expenses are allowable. So I'll have a final school-based expenditures at our next board meeting by schools, and a comprehensive report. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Ms. Hicks.
Good evening, everybody. As I look at my report, it probably would have just been smart for me to talk to you at the next meeting because my ladies just turned in paperwork today, so I don't have the claim amount for this month. And we did accept bids on Monday, open those for our freezer project. And we were waiting on a couple of certificates to kind of certify those before I presented the results to you. So with your permission, I will submit those in the interim between now and the next meeting and have that for you to review and approve. And other than that, we're planning for summer school and things have been going well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. Ms. Linda?
Good evening. I am so happy that you had a chance to hear from Dr. Hudgens. She explained some of the things that we believe and have found to be true. I don't usually share out. I don't usually do this, but Ms. Tasha Dawson, the other young lady who was sitting here, was the trainer for us. We too, I was included, we were trained using the NIT rubric. And when I tell you, it is an amazing tool. It is an amazing thing. I'm excited again about being an educator. You know what I do, and I can't talk about it. But being an educator, oh my God, I studied for it. I went home, I did observations, observing the people on YouTube, and I contacted the principals and told them whenever they do observations, send me a schedule because I want to do this. And so this morning, I got a chance to observe some classroom teaching. And when I tell you it was the most dynamic teaching and learning that I've seen in years. I know that if I'd had teachers like Miss Trish Weaver, I might be a brain surgeon or Dr. Hudgens. I'm telling you, it is so amazing. So the other thing is, last Thursday, we had a focus group, and we focused on recruiting and retention. We talk about it all the time. They know if we go to lunch, I'm trying to recruit the waitresses if they show potential. But Dr. Eloy said, well, Ms. Page, have you thought about doing a community meeting? You know, having some community members, some other people to get some other ideas. And when I tell you, it felt so amazing to have city representation from department heads, from NSU, from BIPSI, some realtors, and we talked about some of the things that we think hinder recruiting and retention in Natchitoches. I'm telling you, it was a good thing, and we plan to have some others. But the teaching and learning that happened at Fairview this morning, it is going to make a difference when we have that all over the district. When we talk to teachers and they say they're just crispy. I won't even say they're burning or on fire or burn out. They are crispy from trying to do all that they have to do. When they use this instrument that this young lady talked about and this group represents, they're not as burned out. They have the tools to be more effective. So at the end of the lesson, they're not as tired, and they will stay with us. They will stay with us because the children are learning. They have less discipline. The children want to be in the classroom. The teachers want to show up for class because it's rewarding. It is so rewarding to have that kind of teaching and learning going on. So I got all off track because I'm so excited. But anyway, our teacher job fair is next Wednesday. So if you feel like you can come by here between 9 and 11, feel free to do so. My report. Oh, I did want to just show you the first little slide where we talked about, maximizing employee capacity. We talked about better ways to recruit and retain. Generally people think that it's the money. Well, it's not always the money. People need the resources. They need the support to do a good job. They can't do well on a job if they don't know what to do, because the pedagogy is one part. But if you don't know what to do with the child in the corner who has not been to school or has some other things going on, you're going to struggle. And so I don't know if you're aware, but the newest people are the first ones to go home. Did you know that? They are, because they're not equipped, but we're on the right road, and I just want to share that with you. And if you have some ideas, please email them to me. If you have some ideas, because we have some things in place already, and we're going to get better.
When you say that you have some, can you elaborate a little bit on that? My concern is always having, and I know we talk about counseling all the time, but because we run into the situation where we have problematic kids. And if you can get these kids into a good counseling program,
Yes, ma'am.
it'll make a difference. Sometimes if you do it voluntarily, the parents won't adhere or respond.
So that was actually one of the conversations we were having today with that. We have a committee going into kind of what I talked to you about with the sheriff and all that. And I don't want to delve too deep because it's very early on, but we have to create a list of, more than a list, but a grouping of all the community pieces that can help people, whether that's counselors, whether that's families helping families, any number of things, to where when this happens, it's almost like, I remember when I was a kid, before cell phones, we'd have a babysitter and my parents would have 20 different numbers for the person, it's almost like that. When this happens, instead of just suspending the kid or calling the police to come get them, it's, okay, we have this long list of resources, and we feel very strongly that, yes, we're gonna expel the kid who needs to be expelled, but that needs to be the nuclear option. Everything else, we can help the teacher, but we can also help the kid at the same time. And I think right now, a lot of times, I say this all the time, when you only have one tool, when your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, we're treating all these kids like nails. And in some cases, we can probably do a little bit more for them. And I think what Ms. Page is also, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, one of our issues too is when you're a new teacher, when you're struggling, you can't make that curriculum come alive. Like if I go to some of these career teachers who've been doing it for a while, I always see Miss Paula Calendar's little thing she puts on her board every day. And I've been in her class before. I have been in her class before, but I also assume I bet it's fun every day because she's got something like that. When the curriculum is engaging, you do see behavioral and all those issues go down. Now, it's not a silver bullet or anything like that, because there's still kids who are gonna be whatever in the most effective teachers classes. But I think that's what we're saying too, is some of our behavior is tied to supporting our teachers more effectively to be more engaging and effective, to where some of that behavior goes away. Because I remember my first year as a teacher, I mean, the kids had me over a rail because I didn't know what to do, and they knew I didn't know what to do, and I knew they knew that, and it was a constant. It was just survival. I think some of our people are in that mode, and I think through all this, we're going to help them get in a better situation where they're being helped and supported.
Great.
So, Ms. Page, thank you for that energetic report.
She's giving Lee a run for his money this time.
Yeah, I'm telling you. All right, Mr. Lee.
Having a hard time going back. Guess I'm gonna have to reload this. Hang on a minute.
We're not gonna have transportation report? Let's see, that's not on there.
He's doing Thursday as well. Spoke to, that's our Mr. Watson, so I called him today, and he's not used to our schedule.
Okay, right here you see before you is the budget as of January 31st. You can see that our actual is at 33 million, nearly 33,500,000 collected, and our expenses are 28 million. It compares to where our budget is over here for the year, which I think we're doing good. We're ahead in revenues. We're behind on expenses, so that's really good. Our child nutrition is showing a positive, and that's always positive. Sometimes child nutrition for certain times of year, particularly after coming off December, gets a little tough because there's so few days that we feed kids in December, but that's all looking good. Title I, once again, this number down here in yellow is ultimately what this number up here, once we get our reimbursements in, will ultimately be what that number is in revenues. There's a lag time. And this right here is what we're showing with the completion of ESSER 2. You'll see that the revenues are here. This 2.65 million, the difference between these two numbers, apparently some of this money is being transferred to ESSER 3. So these two numbers, when we're done with the adjusting entries, will be the same. Right, Sarah? Isn't that right? That's that money that was that overspend in ESSER 2 that was going to be moved to ESSER 3. We still have it booked on our books slightly differently. ESSER 3 is 751,000. As Sarah is bringing up, this number will start accelerating greatly over the next few months, as all our invoices and stuff and monies are being spent in revenues. Our biggest months of spending for ESSER 3 are coming in the next few months. And as Sarah was bringing up, I was unaware of the two $800,000 invoices that are being spent. Just those two alone exceed the amount of money we've already collected in the first several months of this year. So anyhow, you will see this, and this is important for us. Primarily, it's how it's being spent, but not only that, as far as it helps the general fund in the indirect cost aspect. Indirect cost is the fee we get in ESSER funds, which is about 20% of all the money spent can go to general funds for administration of the ESSER funds. And so basically it's reimbursing, and it's helpful. That will be sorely missed. As you remember in the discussion in the last few months, you saw the removal of the ESSER 3 money. It was about $2.4 million that we have been kind of relying on over the years for these ESSER funds, and all that money will be disappearing. But so this is the last year for the ESSER fund indirect costs, and then after that we'll be on our own again. Are there any questions about this budget?
Yeah, under general fund, why did you say those three spaces are blank, or did you say?
Which three spaces?
Under general fund?
The encumbrance column.
Is that usually blank?
Encumbrance has to do with stuff that's in PO that's pending, that isn't in yet. We haven't spent the money. That means we've encumbered the funds.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't actually written a check and spent the money. So it's kind of, can think of it as a payable. We've posted and acknowledged it. So if I cut a purchase order, it becomes an encumbrance. That's what that money is. That just means these are the things that are currently dedicated. We have 423,000 dedicated. we can actually, this money can actually roll over into the next year, depending on when these purchase orders are completed. Generally, though, this number, we try to get to zero by the end of the year. And that's why I cut off purchases around April 15th, because we're trying to shut down our encumbrances so we can clean up the year and have a nice, clean close to the June 30 close of books. This right here is just what, as of January 31st, this is what is pending as far as inbound. We've written POs for it, and this is what's inbound at this time. And this could be a combination of a lot of different things. It could be construction projects, it could be school supplies, it could be, it's not payroll. If you'll notice, there's no encumbrance under payroll. As we pay that the moment we owe it. But, so these are, once again, these are POs that have been issued.
Want to roll over to sales tax, Mr. Lee?
Yes, sir.
Got some sad news there.
Yeah, and let me bring this up. Okay, so over here, the column here is the $1,492,000, which is a 14.85% decline in sales tax collections, which brings a total for the year of a 4.25% decline. We had a board meeting with the tax commission a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. And it looks like this trend is going to continue.
So we had budgeted it flat.
We budgeted flat. We are going to have to make a budget adjustment if that exceeds 5%. We're going to be due a budget adjustment at some point here soon anyhow, just to move some money into different areas. However, these are the facts as we see them. This does affect the sales tax check as well. But right now, for the year, it's 4.25%. And, yeah, it was a little steeper than I expected, to be honest with you. But in talk to Laura, Jeff Coates, her name, she just thinks that until the end of June, this will continue. You'll notice, well, it's not on this report. I did get a report. What's really down substantially in our collections is motor vehicle sales. That's down substantially. And I believe that to be a nationwide symptom of they've still got them priced at that exorbitant price. And with high interest rates, there's no way anybody can afford to be buying all these vehicles. So there's a lot of cars on car lots right now. Hopefully they'll start bringing those prices down. So. Okay. I wanted to share with y'all just a few things that are not on informational reports, just briefly. I will be presenting to the board at the next board meeting a sale of 3 pieces of property. Emil, you'll be glad to know that we had an appraised value of $72,000 on the Cleachville property, and we got a cash offer for $74,500. I will be presenting that to the board for approval. Gentleman's name is Stephen Belo. And we also had property at the old Kisatchie location. We had 2 pieces of property there, 5.64 acres and a 1.88 acres. We've gotten more than appraised value cash offer on those 2 pieces of property as well. You might remember I was complaining one time we had a rooftop on one of our properties. This is one of those properties. He is going to buy it and then donate it to the church. And this clears that all up, and I'm very thankful. So I'll be presenting those to the board for consideration next week. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lay.
Okay,
Miss Tankia.
Oh, I'm ready. 5, finance, facilities, services, and insurance. 5A, discuss and consider a resolution adjusting Hammond, Seals, Atkins, Geis, Noah, and Perkins to reflect the hourly rates approved by the Attorney General for employment of special counsel.
Yes, ma'am. So we received a letter from Hammonds and Seals that I believe 2018, prior to my arrival, y'all adopted a pay scale of $150. And that was appreciated, but what's happened now is they're trying to maintain and attract high quality lawyers, And so what they'd like us to adopt is the Attorney General's pay scale, which what it does is it shows anywhere between $125 and $250 for special and general counsel, depending on the expertise and experience of the individual lawyer. So basically that means we don't call Bob, we call the youngest associate. But they've sent this out to everyone. This is something that they're doing statewide, and I think we all value their guidance and expertise in all things legal.
Okay. That's it, Ms. Tenke?
Yes, that concludes finance.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. And now we have Mr. Dancy.
7A, discuss and consider approving new policy, IDBB, suicide prevention education.
Yes, sir. All the policies that I provided y'all with this month are all from this past legislation. Me and Ms. Revels didn't want to bombard you with like 20 at a time, so we've been implementing these as we go this year. But this is about teaching suicide prevention or suicide education in grades 6 through 12. But there is a caveat that if a parent or legal guardian wants their child excused from that, they may do that.
And item 7B, discuss and consider updates to policy EBBH, use of automated external defibrillator, AED.
Yes, sir. So basically, they changed some of the verbiage. You can see in schools which, and now it's each school shall. So it's predetermined that you should have the AED, and then they want us to have a plan for all that and access to it and things of that nature, which we've been on top of that. So the only thing we're trying to do now is, I think, change out some long-term batteries in some of these.
Right. Item 7C, discuss and consider approving new policy EBBJ, cardiac emergency response plan.
Yeah, and I apologize. I kind of included this part
Yeah,
in the previous one,
that's
but this, and I actually have the sample. We're giving each principal a sample policy. They have to kind of fill in
Okay.
the gaps as to who the people are and where things are, but it's somewhat generic, and then they get to put it the context for their site.
7D, discuss and consider approving updates to policy EBBC, emergency crisis management.
So I think, yeah, we've been talking about this a good deal in light of our bomb threats, but a similar thing, they added some verbiage. The superintendent shall establish a district threat assessment team, and so that team then has certain responsibilities and things of that nature about communicating to parents and all sorts of that type stuff. So we're in the process. We had some of this in place already, but there's some nuances we have to add.
On 7E, discuss and consider 2024-2025 school calendar.
My favorite topic of the year. Miss Jennifer Martin has been leading this for us, and she's going to lead the discussion.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
If you don't know me, I am Jennifer Martin. I'm the social studies specialist, but I also act as the school calendar representative from the teaching and learning department. I've really enjoyed working through the process of the school calendar, and I am here tonight to make a recommendation to you for the 24-25 school year calendar. To review the process and the parameters used to devise the recommended calendar, I'll first refer to the document. Do they have, I don't know what order they're
all one
in, Lee, on
document.
there, but I'll be referring first to the document titled School Calendar Preparation.
Keep going,
I
Lee.
don't know what order it's on there, Mr.
Below it.
Roscom. Yes, sir. It's probably after that. That's it. That's the first one I'll refer to. So the process used to devise the recommended calendar in January, teachers and staff had the opportunity to offer input through a survey. I also met with the principal advisory group and obtained input from those principals. Also, each principal named a representative from their campus that would come to a work session the next month. In February, Dr. Eloy met with the parent advisory group. In the middle of the document, the results from the advisory group and the survey showed no pattern of significant shift desired. The majority supports the current calendar framework. And the full week of fall break and winter break are very popular. So with the results from the advisory group and the survey, proposals were drafted. And then the next thing that happened in February were those school representatives from each campus came to a work session. The agenda for the work session that was on February 12th, the agenda for those representatives, they reviewed the parameters for consideration of the calendar. Then they previewed each proposal. They gave feedback as a group on pertaining to if the proposals met the considerations that we use as parameters to devise the framework of the calendar. After that, they took the proposals back to their campus for a school vote. So there you will see on either February 13th or 14th, each school held a staff meeting for school staff to view the proposals and cast, each person got to cast their vote for the preferred option. And then by February 16th, each school representative turned in their school's vote to the teaching and learning department. The next document I'll refer to is the calendar parameters. These are the very important guidelines that we consider when devising the calendar framework. The current calendar that we have, as I said, there was no pattern of significant shift. So the calendar framework that we have now, these are the same parameters we've worked on for the past 6 years. Of course, the calendar needs to support improving student achievement, which I think our data has shown with this calendar framework, that we've been in the top 10 the last couple of years. Bulletin 741 states there must be a minimum of 63,720 minutes of instructional time during the year. The recommended calendar does that through 168 instructional days for students and 176 days for teachers, and you see how those teacher days are added up. We have an instructional day of 385 minutes per day. That does give us a slight overage of the minimum instructional minutes. That gives us a total of 64,680 instructional minutes. So that overage provides us 2.5 days for weather or emergencies. It's really important for our semesters to be balanced to support student credit earnings for those courses in high school and teacher retirement and leaves. So the recommended calendar, the consideration is to have 84 days per semester for students and 88 per semester for teachers. It's important to end the fall semester for high school prior to Christmas break so that when those students, we are on the block system, so high school students start a whole new schedule when they come back in January. So that's important for them to come back from Christmas and start their new schedule on that first day back. It's important to avoid chopped weeks as much as possible so that we maintain strong weeks of instruction. And there is a policy that if a public school system uses any school campus as a polling place on election day, then in even-numbered years, public schools must be closed on the Tuesday of the first full week of November. So that is something that we had to consider for next year's calendar because it would be November of an even-numbered year. With all that said, that brings me to March for the board vote. So the calendar that you see in your packet, this is the calendar that is supported by 95% of school staff as they voted the week before winter break. And so therefore, this is the calendar that I'm recommending to you for the 24-25 school year, and I look forward to your approval.
I got a question with it. Just looking at the calendar, even this year calendar. Why, like in October, the kids is out 7 days? Because then you come back, they're out a whole week, then you come back that Monday, they don't come back that Monday, a professional develop. Why can't they have the professional develop before they get out of school and have these kids come back to school? Because this last break we had, I had a bunch of parents call. They thought, I guess y'all had a call because they sent out saying kids didn't come back to school Monday. Everybody that I talked with, they thought the kid was supposed to come back Monday because they got out that Friday before, then they was out that whole week, then they was out on Monday. To me, you know, we saying by teaching the kids, but you got 2 months that the kids is out 7 days. You know, to me, that's the profession to develop because you got parent-teacher conference, but they're out that Friday. You know, why can't they do a profession to develop that day?
So that's a really great discussion point. And so I think that even though your question was specifically about October, that I'll take this opportunity to address the PD day in January and the one we just had as well. So with all of the, just like the strong grant that we've received and all of the work that teachers do towards student achievement, the professional development days that are built into the calendar, which I might add before I explain this part, that Louisiana Revised Statute 17-154-3 states that teachers need to work 5 days beyond student days. So we do have those 5 days built in, but we do not, that's in addition to the parent-teacher conference days. The reason that those PD days are so important is because if you'll see the 2 days at the beginning of the year in August, when teachers receive their student rosters, the first thing they do is look at the academic level of each student and determine academic goals for that year for each student that they will teach in that year. For high school teachers, they determine for that semester the academic goal for those students. So therefore, in October, on the PD day in October, that is strategically and purposefully placed at the end of first quarter, so that when teachers on like October 3rd and 4th, they are strictly doing a parent-teacher conference. Depending on the way that the school sets up their conferences, they could use that partially as a teacher work day if possible. But on that PD day in October, in January, they are specifically looking at academic progress towards student goals. And that is really deep work for teachers, that they need time to attend to that and make action plans per student. Again, in February, though that is not exactly at the end of a quarter, that is strategically placed because that is 2/3 way through the third quarter, where we have enough time prior to LEAP testing for teachers to look at the student progress toward academic goals for each student and have time to adjust action plans before it's LEAP time. So that is the strategic reason for the placement of those PD days. In October and January, prior to those breaks, students have just taken proficiency exams, so they have fresh data of where students are in learning standards and mastering those standards at the time of that break. We did have some teachers on the survey cite the PD days. 11 teachers specifically cited PD days, but they asked to please keep those.
That's on this calendar, that's 40 days in a year, the kid's gonna be out of school. To me, that's a lot of days.
Superintendent Eloy made a comment earlier that he said there's no appreciable increase in the days out.
So, because I think there has been, because I've heard it from board members that there's a perception, and I know oftentimes perception becomes reality, but there's a perception that we are out more days. What we did is we did look back even to Mr. Skinner's administration to see if we have at all increased the number of days that teachers are out or increased the number of days that students are out. And what we found is there has not been any increase. The teacher, and I'll be honest, one of the reasons is that you have statewide, you have some contracts where teachers work 177 days, 176 days, 179. There's any number, and those numbers probably started 30, 40 years ago. And it's not, the reason it tends to stay that way is because politically, if you think about it, say we want to add teacher work days and we want to go from 176 work days and go to 182 because some random parish is at 182. It's difficult to do that because then what you're doing to teacher contracts is you're saying, hey, I'm going to pay you the same amount, but I'm going to increase the number of days. So we looked at it, and that was probably TMI, but for the most part, teacher work days have not changed in that same time period. And then we looked at student days. What we've done is we've consolidated days into where they're in these stretches, and I think Ms. Martin illuminated the reason for that is because when you have like a random Tuesday or a random Wednesday, what that does to instruction is it makes it disjointed, and then all of a sudden the Thursday and Friday become wasted days, so to speak. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep those weeks together. Now, in order to do that, you put these consolidated weeks together, and so there's a feeling that we're out more. And I'll be honest with you, I think that feeling this year was exacerbated because if y'all recall, we came back from the normal Christmas break, then we had snowpocalypse, and then I think January kind of made it feel even worse because I'll be honest, I think I talked to my wife because Fairview and then Lakeview I think was even worse. In that month, which had nothing to do with us being off, it had to do with water and it had to do with snow or
Freeze or something.
whatever it was. They were only in school 12 days. And then that kind of feeling persisted. But yes, we have run the numbers, and these are, number one, it complies with state law, but then number two, it has not changed, even if there's a perception has changed since the Mr. Skinner time where there may have not been these concerns. I will also tell y'all, and I know we're Natchitoches and we're not necessarily going to do what others do, and we can do what we want, but this form, which is, you have Red River who has a year-long calendar, and some people call that balanced calendar. We actually are a balanced calendar. We're what you would call a 45-6 calendar. You go to school 45 days and then you're out 6. It's a version of that. And what the research tells us with those balanced calendars is there's a lot of things that benefits, whether it's the big one being academic achievement, but it also reduces some of the things we don't like some student behavior and things like that. So I know, because trust me, I'm a parent, although I'm a parent with a wife who works in the school system, so it doesn't affect us as much. But all my friends are in different industries, and so I hear this at times. But I also hear some of the benefits of this, where families can have more flexibility throughout the year to have family time. There's also not this sporadic day here, day there. And so for those who have to find childcare, which no matter when we're off, they do, sometimes it's easier to get someone for that entirety than it is on a random Tuesday or a random Thursday. But I will tell you, I mean, I think y'all all know my disdain for the calendar discussion, because no matter what, there is no perfect calendar. But for the majority of northern districts, and north of I-10, this type of framework, with probably some deviations, is what's being adopted. I can specifically, Sabine's is just like this. That's a district that's high achieving. DeSoto's is like this high achieving. And there's several districts, Lincoln, I think, as well, high achieving. They just made an A this year, that are moving towards this, not year round, but balanced model.
Well, and if I may reiterate any part that I said earlier, again, the work that teachers are doing with student data to address goals that students need to reach throughout the year, I think it goes to show that these PD days and work days are so important for that work, that it's a job-embedded day, and it's paying off because of our growth over the last few years in student achievement.
Martin,
So
can I-
those types of days offer teachers to be able to do that and really dig deep into student progress and where students are at.
I hate to derail you because
okay.
Miss Martin's she's like a freight train when she gets going, and she's smart as a whip. I do think it's important to note, I don't think most people, and I know as a board y'all do, but most people don't understand how sophisticated we've become with moving student data. Traditionally, historically, I mean, even when I was at a really good A school, everything was post-mortem. So you went through the whole year, you did 9 months, you took a test, and then in June, oh, we did good, or oh, we did bad. What we're doing here is literally they take their proficiency exam, principal gets it all together, they have that data, and then we do basically what we call a state of the school, where, if Miss Martin was back at Provençal, she would literally look and say, man, we bombed in, 5th grade math. And because of that knowledge, then her PD is not some random thing where it's like, hey guys, we're gonna learn about social emotional learning and blah, 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 because we booked them 6 months ago. Instead, her PD is going to be on the specific action plan that's going to be differentiated for her school, which is only able to be done because she did the proficiency test beforehand. She doesn't say at school, says, hey, things are great, but guys, we got to all focus on math, and even more specifically, it's, I don't know, fractions, whatever. And what we've seen with that is, I'm telling you, I love being in these QDRs because what happens, they come back, then they go in QDRs, and I see that Fairview last time had a assessment index of 41, but then because they put that action plan together, and they had that ready for their teachers, and then they implemented the action plan at the PD, all of a sudden they come to the next QDR, and now we have an assessment index that specifically went up in the areas that they targeted. It's so strategic, it's so focused, and I know a lot of times people don't think of a calendar as an instructional tool. And I think that's because a lot of districts don't use it as that, but this is specifically made to improve instruction. And when we get those calls, because I get them too, about like, hey, I mean, are we out more? We are actually exceeding what the state's asking us to do. We are in school more minutes and more days than the state requires. And if the state bumps it up, I'll be the first one to say, hey, let's go to school more, because I love school. I've been in school for the past 35 years.
A comment Dr. Eloy made about 8 weeks ago. He was talking about each one of our schools, and almost every one of our schools. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you said with their assessment index that they're doing, they came in within 3 points plus or minus, or 2 points plus or minus on their school testing. Is that correct?
They were able, what we look at the end of the year when we get scores is we look for alignment, because that third quarter is our big quarter, because I'll actually look and I'll say, okay, Marthaville is showing that their assessment index is at this, and we have all their other quadrants and everything in there. We predict that if this stays the same, if you were to test today, you'd be at this SPS. And now we increase that a little because there's still a little bit of instruction between quarter 3 and the actual test, but for the most part, it's really indicative. And we are able, I mean, y'all, I literally, and this isn't because anything special about me, it's because our data is so well produced. Me and Felicia sat down when we got data in November. We sat down in August. She had all this stuff out, and she goes, okay, I have us as an 80, Dr. Eloy, but last year I was 2 points off. I go, Felicia, I bet you a Coke, we're an 81.5. And as a district, we were an 81.5. That predictability isn't just at a district level. We are able to predict that. We know on a day-to-day basis that this school is operating at this level. And so, trust me, like, I know this is a headache for me. It's a headache for y'all. But this is one of those things, and I rarely, try to die on a hill, but this is one of those things that is so important to the strategy of our academic piece of our district, which, if you're going to die on a hill, it might as well be academics if you're a superintendent. So.
This kind of there's
A little dramatic there, Dr. Eloy.
Yes, ma'am. So everything we did, there were some outliers. There were some people like, hey, can we go to year-round school? Or, hey, can we just,
That was only one person.
can we go to this? Or, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff.
Single person.
We tried to look for themes within the groups. And the biggest theme, and this isn't because they like me or anything like that, because trust me, there was also people who just said, all sorts of stuff. But the biggest theme was, we like it how it is. Don't change it ain't broke, don't fix it.
We're very close to year-round school now, though. If you look at starting in August as early as we are and getting out in May, we're very close. And I know that the science involved in this matches up with what we're doing with NEAT and the rest of them. I mean, and a strong grant. I mean, these things all fit together. It's just that when you go in the grocery store or any other place, and you get a parent that corners you up and says, "Are y'all ever going back to school?" And it's like,
well, two things. I would say this year they have a legitimate complaint because January, I'll be honest, January threw everyone off, and that was awful. And the other thing I would suggest is Walmart will allow you to order your groceries over the phone and deliver them to you. It's
so
amazing.
you don't have to go in.
Is the 2.5 days for emergencies and weather, is that the normal number we've had?
Yes, sir.
And
It's three, it's,
not more.
Next year,
Enough, I'm assuming.
now look, 2 or 3 years ago, we went with none and it bit us. So,
So one year, I think my first year, I think we had 5 and we didn't use any of them. The next year we had 1 or 2 and we needed 5 more, although the state came in. I feel like 2.5 is that good middle ground. I mean, it's Louisiana. You can't ever predict it. I mean, the one year we had none or 1 or 2, I'm sorry, one or none was when we had the first time that a hurricane made it all the way to Natchitoches.
we had a blizzard and then we had a
Oh,
hurricane.
I'm sorry. Yeah, 2 freezes.
Ms. Hicks was head first down in freezers pulling food out.
I want to say thank you, Ms. Martin, for outlining that and explaining the strategic aspects of it, because that really does make a little bit more sense to us, right? When
It's
it's
truly very
explained why
strategic
it's
on-
purposeful.
Well, and there's a reason I chose Miss Martin, because in terms
Oh, I
of
know.
laying something out, she's.
do I have
I'm
that?
chasing rabbits, and that's why she wouldn't let me interrupt her, which is good.
So I wouldn't argue any of the strategic aspects of it. It did feel like we're out more this year as having children, simply because there's more. I mean, it looks like almost a week every month when you look at it that way. But I now understand that better, right?
Well, and just like all the years I was in the classroom, we had so many chopped weeks with 2 days here, 1 day there, that really it was just like 6 years ago, I think it was like 18, 19, that was restructured. And instead of having all those chopped weeks, we ended up with a full fall break and a full week for winter break. So it really equals out, like Dr. Eloy said, to about the same number of days. It just looks different calendar-wide.
What I hear the most on questions about the calendar, and you're right, lots of people have opinions on the calendar, is no Mardi Gras break this year, and again, no Mardi Gras break next year. And feels like we get in closer to Christmas, right?
Okay, so
Those are the two
That-
questions or dislikes that I
Okay.
get the most.
So, with that, I will tell you that in 25, 26, President's Day is the same week as Mardi Gras. But you also want to show a pattern for when your breaks fall, and that parents always know and teachers always know how that pattern lays out. So in the fall semester, you always know fall break is happening at the end of first quarter. You know Thanksgiving break is going to happen Thanksgiving week. You know when Christmas break is going to happen and how long it's going to last. So therefore, you want to create a pattern in the spring semester as well. And so if you always are changing by when that Mardi Gras date falls, because it's on moons and all this kind of stuff on when that is, then there's never a true pattern that falls. So our pattern over the last few years since 1920 has been that winter break is the week of President's Day. I think there's been 2 or 3 times over those 6 years that Mardi Gras has been in that week, whereas next year the year after next in 25, 26, that happens to happen again. So it kind of be like, 2 birds with 1 stone. I do understand that, but it's the same with Easter break. So we do try to connect spring break with Easter. Like next year, Easter falls very late. It's not until April 20th. So like this year, we have Good Friday and the following week for spring break, where on this recommended calendar, it's the opposite. It's the week leading up to Easter with Easter Monday. The reason for that is because if the state follows the same pattern as the last few years since Cade Brumley took over as state superintendent, we anticipate that state testing will start that week of April 21st. So we don't want to be out the week state testing should start and then put teachers and students in a position where they come back from spring break and boom, they have no review days, they have no get back in the swing of things, and they're boom taking the LEAP test. So that is why spring break is the opposite next year, is because of that late Easter date.
Yep, I think that's probably a good choice. But I will say,
It goes back to
if we're
patterns.
trying to keep consistent,
Yeah.
Easter changes every year.
It does.
Mardi Gras is dependent on Easter.
I think we're just saying that Easter's more
Yeah.
important than Mardi Gras.
No, we do try to have a pattern, and so far for next year would be the 7th year that winter break is connected to President's Week and spring break is connected to Easter.
Ms. Martin, this is probably the most concise, informative, whatever description of the calendar we have ever heard. Before it was mojo juice and foo-foo juice. We had no idea.
I expected nothing less from her.
Yeah.
Items 7, F, and G will be taken up next board meeting.
Board
That
members-
concludes.
Thank you. Board members, any other discussion? Thank y'all that attended the Safety Committee meeting today. It was very informative. And we will see you all in Baton Rouge at LSBA. Meeting adjourned.